Good Tuesday morning, everyone, and welcome to another reading from Enochian Vision Magic. What I'm holding up here, we'll talk just briefly about it, and we'll talk more about it much later. But this is one of the ensigns of creation, one of the 7 planetary talismans that are part of the structure of the Holy Table. 7 planetary talismans surround the Siglum Dei Meth in the center of the Holy Table. This one happens to be the one for Mercury. And get a better look at it there. Dee and Kelley were instructed to make these out of purified tin. And that's what this one is. So, and I've got the others right here. Anyway, today's chapter. This is still the beginning of the book. It's a rather long book. This is chapter 3. Dee and Kelley versus the Golden Dawn and Aleister Crowley. The little epigram is from Dee's diaries. It's the angel Ave talking to Dee and Kelley on Monday, June 25th, 1584. Now hath it pleased God to deliver this doctrine again out of darkness, and to fulfill his promise with thee for the books of Enoch. To whom he saith, as he said unto Enoch, let those that are worthy understand this by thee, that it may be one witness of my promise toward thee. Modern Enochian magic is first developed in the late 19th century by S.L. MacGregor Mathers and the adepts of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and later adapted and augmented by Aleister Crowley and others, is a remarkable and tidy, self-referential system of visionary magic. It is based upon a small portion of the 16th century manuscripts of Dr. John Dee and Edward Kelley, and the mystique of its colorful origins make it initially alluring to magical dilettantes and dabblers. However, the complexity of the system, as outlined by Golden Dawn Crowley texts, continues to effectively guard the mysteries of this marvelous magical art form from all but the most serious, courageous, tenacious, foolish, or naive. For most of us who cut our Enochian magic teeth during the latter half of the 20th century, the Golden Dawn, GD, and Crowley books were at the time the only source material readily available to us. By following the intricate procedures outlined in these texts, we proceeded with our visionary quests along 2 avenues of experimentation offered to us by the G.D. Crowley model. One branch of the system dealing with the elemental or manifest universe, the other dealing with the etheric or celestial. I'll discuss these branches in more detail in Book 4 of this. Both of these magical environments are populated by spiritual beings whose names are drawn from 5 grids of lettered squares received by Dee and Kelley during a series of angelic communications during the 3rd or the Enochian period of their magical operations. Both the elemental and the celestial magical environments and their spirit inhabitants are accessed by intoning one or more of 19 calls, which are chanted in an angelic language that was given to the Elizabethan magicians under breathtaking and extraordinary circumstances. during the last months of their magical workings. Theoretically, these calls induce very specific trances, whereby the magician can pinpoint particular spiritual entities or environments he or she wishes to contact or visit. As you can imagine, this is a very attractive prospect to the magical explorer. The visionary labor of many postmodern Enochian explorers was well repaid, for we soon discovered that despite our very limited access to original texts, not to mention our inexperience and ineptitude, this kind of magic actually works. With surprisingly few exceptions, when we followed the G.D. Crowley procedures and techniques, even the most insensitive and skeptical among us received visions we deemed appropriate to the particular regions we were exploring. The technique used to receive these visions such as these, is called scrying. The Golden Dawn and Crowley often referred to the practice as traveling in the spirit vision. Scrying is perhaps quite simply the ability to put oneself in touch with one's own psychic senses. In magical operations, the scrying session is usually preceded by a formal ceremony designed to put the magician in an altered state of consciousness. It is, for all intent and purposes, a shamanistic experience. The thoughts, mental images, and impressions that flood the magician's mind during this altered state are subsequently recorded in the magician's journal and analyzed. Naturally, some of us proved more talented than others. Art lovers and movie fans make particularly good candidates for Enochian vision magic, for they see with the romantic's eye and already possess a vast memory bank of evocative landscapes, archetypal characters, and supernatural beings. They are by nature dreamers, skilled at communicating through a vocabulary of images and visual metaphors. But even the least imaginative of us in short order learned to develop our own visionary skills that became increasingly honed by our repeated work with the system. There's no question in my mind, at least, that the Enochian magic procedures and techniques developed by the Golden Dawn and Crowley embody a highly effective system of magical working that, if properly applied, can be an integral component to the modern magician's program of personal self-development. This is especially true for those of us whose magical careers have led us to the Kabbalah-based disciplines referred to today in specialized circles as Hermetic or ceremonial magic. I'm going to just read. There we go. Center me a little bit there. To modern ceremonial magicians, Enochian magic appears at first glance to enjoy a comfortable compatibility with our world of pentagram rituals and hexagram rituals, tarot cards, trees of life, Kabbalistic path workings, chakra work, invocation, god forms, and spirit evocations. This compatibility, however, has been for the most part contrived and jerry-rigged. For as efficacious as the Golden Dawn Crowley applications and techniques are, they bear little resemblance to anything Dee and Kelley practiced or were instructed to engage in by their angelic contacts. with all due respect to Mathers. It's clear that he and his Golden Dawn adepts chose to limit their attention only to those portions of the source texts that offered material that they could fit easily into the Kabbalistic Hermetic schema to which they were so passionately committed. Furthermore, it's clear that in many instances, when the original material didn't fit the schema, they found a way to make it fit. This fact should not diminish our respect for the wonderfully effective system the Golden Dawn and Crowley have bequeathed to us. But it has prompted many of us who obviously have an inordinate amount of time on our hands to examine in greater detail the surviving Dee and Kelley material that has now become more readily available to the serious student. What we discovered is an overwhelmingly large body of works, books, notebooks, and diaries, the most interesting of which span the better part of 3 years of intense magical operations. Most of this material appears to have nothing whatsoever to do with Enochian magic as practiced today. As I mentioned earlier, Dee and Kelley's magical workings took place in 3 distinct phases that yielded 3 unique magical systems. For convenience sake, I will refer to these as 1, Heptarchia Mystica, or simply Heptarchia, and Loa Gaeth, which includes the angelic alphabet, and number 3, Enochian. One could argue quite convincingly that the revelations Dee and Kelley received during the Enochian period represent the creme de la creme of their magical workings, and that it's unnecessary to waste our time on painfully complex details of Heptarchia and Loa Gaeth periods. After all, the Golden Dawn Crowley system and techniques were developed from this Plu Ultra Enochian material, and everything seems to work just fine. Thank you. In fact, for the better part of 20 years, I was one of the most vocal apologists for the Enochian school, whose motto is, "Don't try to duplicate the magic Dee and Kelley did to receive the system. Just use the system they received." Then starting in 1999, a couple things happened that caused me to rethink the wisdom of this attitude. First, I became enthralled with the work of Clay Holden and the John Dee Publication Project, which brought the glories of Quinti Libri Mysteriorum to life on the World Wide Web. Then in 2003, my OTO brother and Enochian magic adept Christios Peer, hope you're watching, sent me a computer disk of material from a marvelous Enochian seminar he presented in Pittston, Pennsylvania. Along with the seminar material, he sent me a collection of photographic files of surviving Dee manuscripts from the British Library and other materials that were of great interest to me. I assure you, I could have not written this book without these materials and the profound insights of this great modern magician, Christios Peer. Around the same time, my publisher sent me a copy of Joseph A. Peterson's book, John Dee's 5 Books of Mystery, original source book of Enochian magic. I had years earlier examined much of the material enlarged from microfilm, but now I had the luxury of comfortably reviewing it in clearer formats with Latin translations on my home computer and from Peterson's marvelously well-organized book. I must confess that even with this information stacked conveniently and legibly under my nose, I was overwhelmed by the sheer immensity of it all. I'm interested in the magical adventures of Dee and Kelley as much as the next fellow. But I also have a life. Did I need to sacrifice 3 years of my own life in order to eavesdrop on every detail of 3 years of theirs? More than ever, I saw the wisdom of simply using the magical system Dee and Kelley received and of not wasting precious time to recreate the magic they practiced to receive the system. After all, can't I drive a car without first having to build it myself? But we're not talking about driving cars. We're talking about the art of magic. In the final analysis, no matter what system the magician chooses, in order to make it work most effectively, he or she must first become attuned to that system's particular way of viewing the universe. This concept is so important to the understanding of what will follow in this book that I will pause to illustrate with an example. The ceremonial magician who practices Kabbalistic magic acquiesces, at least for the duration of the working, to see things in heaven and earth in terms of a hierarchy of spirit personages expressed by various god names, archangels, angels, spirits, intelligences, and demons of the system. In Kabbalah-based magic, such spiritual beings are conveniently organized and arranged according to fourfold formulas dictated by the Hebrew letters that make up the great name of God, Yod-He, Vav-He, and by the familiar schema of the Tree of Life with its 10 Sephiroth and 22 paths that connect them. Before the magician is ready to operate within the laws and peculiarities of this Kabbalistic worldview, he or she must first become a fit component of that universe, a harmonious and integral part of this great divine machine, a vital step on this hierarchy of the stairway of consciousness. Like the ballerina, whose 90 minutes on stage is the product of years of practice and thousands of hours of rehearsal, the magical artist must also be first transformed into a proper instrument of his or her craft. Magicians achieve this transformation with preliminary meditations and rituals by which we adjust our focus step by step until we become comfortable citizens of the specific magical world in which we intend to operate. For the Western ceremonial magician, the well-worn curriculum of the Golden Dawn provides a perfect example of this step-by-step adjustment process. First, the magician becomes master of the pentagram and a full citizen of the world of the 5 elements of the macrocosmic universe. By repeated performances of the pentagram rituals and meditations, the magician's psyche becomes balanced and accustomed to the world of the 4 directional winds, the 4 elements, the corresponding magical weapons, the wand, the cup, the sword, and the disc. Then once the elemental microcosmic universe is mastered, the magician then moves on to the next step in the attunement process by mastering the rituals of the hexagram. Here, the magician's point of reference is enlarged as his or her consciousness and identity is obliged to expand from the microcosmic world of the elements to the macrocosmic greater world, the world characterized by the sun, orbited by the planets, and surrounded by the belt of the zodiac. This is very basic stuff, but it illustrates how rituals enable ceremonial magicians to externalize internal processes and undergo self-transformation. Would-be magicians who attempt more advanced work without being adjusted by these early attunements are ill-prepared to understand or properly absorb what is happening to them within the context of the progressively higher magical environments in which they presumptuously wish to operate. It's true that some magicians may receive seemingly dramatic and noteworthy effects from such premature efforts, but seeds of promise cannot long take root in soil that is not properly prepared or that is too shallow. Late in 2005, while gathering material for the yet another Enochian workshop series for my Monday Night Magic class, I pored over the records of Dee and Kelley's pre-Enochian workings in hopes of finding the key to their preparatory process. What exactly did the angels do to Dee and Kelley during the years prior to the final Enochian revelations? Dee and Kelley received some pretty interesting things during those early workings, including instructions for the creation of an array of magical implements that the Golden Dawn and Crowley all but ignored. The ring, the lamen, which is to be worn by the magician as a breastplate and which connects him or her to the holy table. The holy table itself, inscribed with letters from an angelic alphabet and upon which would set the sigillum de Ameth. The sigillum de Ameth, an intricately carved disc made from purified beeswax. I'll show you mine in subsequent readings. An artifact so stunning and historically, hang on, intriguing that it is prominently displayed today in the King's Library wing of the British Museum. Then, those 7 talismans, five squares and 2 circles, called ensigns of creation, which surround the sigillum on the holy table. All these items were linked to one another and to the magicians by an overwhelmingly complex process that distilled, shuffled, and organized thousands of letters from numerous and varied alphanumeric grids. These grids had been painstakingly received in vision, one letter at a time, by Kelley and duly transcribed by Dee. The letters spelled the names of great angels, which in turn, when manipulated, yielded the names of subordinate angels, which produced still more names. Now, before we get too excited about dusting off and playing with all of these pre-Enochian magical tools and furniture, I have to make myself clear on one very important point. These items were received during the first phase of Dee and Kelley's workings. This period yielded a unique system of planetary magic they referred to as Heptarchia Mystica. See Book 2. To all appearances, heptarchic magic has little or no direct relationship to the Enochian magic system they received during their final days of practice. Also, it's demonstrably clear, in my mind at least, that Enochian magic can be performed quite effectively without using the ring, the lamen, the holy table, and so on. However, it's also equally clear to me that as Dee and Kelley were receiving and working with the items and concepts of heptarchic magic, their minds and psychic bodies were day by day undergoing subtle yet profound evolutionary changes. Excuse me. I'll take a sip of coffee while you think about that. The process of them tediously receiving all of this information was mutating them, which DuQuette says here in a second. Could the reason the practical Enochian material came so very late in the game be that Dee and Kelley had to first complete their transformation into magicians who could appreciate and handle the advanced work? After all, isn't that what magic is really about? By the mere fact of meticulously following the angel's complex directions, which filtered and distilled these magical concepts into material manifestation. If so, this would be a vital preparatory step that modern Enochian magicians are omitting entirely. I grew intrigued with this idea. Given the fact that the Golden Dawn Crowley methods of Enochian magic already work so well right out of the box, how much better might these same techniques work if the magician were first prepared and attuned in a manner similar to the way Dee and Kelley had been prepared and attuned? A magician so equipped would be picking up, as it were, where the two Elizabethans left off in 1584. I was at first uneasy with this theory because it became dangerously near to destroying my comfortable philosophy of don't try to duplicate the magic Dee and Kelley did to receive the system, just use the system they received. However, my inherent laziness was rewarded, and I eventually took comfort in the realization that in order to ceremonially prepare oneself to perform Enochian magic, one not need to tortuously repeat everything Dee and Kelley did to receive the ring, the holy table, the lamen, the seven ensigns of creation, and the sigillum Dei Meth. Instead, one must simply understand and use in a way that mirrors the preparation process, and use the ring, the holy table, the lamen, the seven instances of creation, and the sigillum Dei Meth that they received. This book was written to show the practicing Enochian magician how to precisely do that. And the little ritual in the chapter 1, which I read on Sunday, And if you haven't seen that, please scroll down and see that. It's already gotten 2,600 views, so I know some of you are watching that thing. So, and the little ritual in chapter 1, and outlined in greater details in the appendix, is the ceremony that embodies this preparation process. Like the rituals of the pentagram that prepare us for elemental magic, like the rituals of the hexagram and the pentagram, and the rituals of the, I'll read that again. Like the rituals of the pentagram that prepare us for elemental magic, like the rituals of the hexagram that prepare us for planetary magic, I believe this little ceremony captures the essence of the step-by-step process of personal alchemy that prepared and attuned Dee and Kelley. The material is based on 2 series of classes that Constance and I held in our home in 2005 and 2006. Visionary workings that spanned a period of just over 7 months. While the class spent considerable amount of time discussing and analyzing the magical theories that underlie these methods of preparation, most of our time was spent actually applying the techniques in a formal and ceremonial manner prior to group and individual Enochian scrying sessions. My biggest challenge for both the class series and writing this book has been how best to communicate the essence of the breathtakingly intricate procedures that occupied Dee and Kelley during their years of preparation without enmeshing the reader in a time-devouring web of details. It is somewhat like trying to convey the profundity of a great cathedral without dwelling minutely on every action of every stonemason who fashioned each perfect stone. I have resolved, therefore, to stay focused on the big picture and allow the reader to wrap his or her mind around the major themes, secure in the knowledge that he or she can proceed to dissect the method of the madness and discover further revelations by referring to the now readily available source texts. It is very important for the reader to understand that this book was not written as a substitute for the source material, but simply as a guide to the practical, self-transformational applications of this magical art. I advise those of you who may be committed to in-depth academic research of this subject not to view my book as an authoritative replacement for the original texts. Dee and Kelley's records are liberally peppered with irregularities, conflicting instructions, missing pieces, and typos. I've done my best to wade through these and be as consistent and accurate as possible. But when I say I'm going to stay focused on the big picture, that's exactly what I mean. Are you ready to begin? If so, we need to first talk briefly about the mind of Dr. John Dee and explore the reasons why the secrets of heaven and earth were communicated to him in alphanumeric ciphers, tables, and squares. And that's where we'll pick up tomorrow on Chapter 4, The Mind of a Cryptographer. Again, the book is the Enochian Vision Magic, and we're trying as best we can to read through it. I've recently done a 4-part magical, or 3-part Enochian Magic seminar The recordings of those are available. I'll try to put up the link of how you can procure the links to that. Until tomorrow, I know it's been a little long today. Until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.